Baltimore Ravens 7-round mock draft, no trades. Here we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing you Ravens content every single day. If you want to see that daily Ravens content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers before next season starts. We're nearing 4,700, so it is a possibility. But if you're new to the channel, new to the series, every Monday in the offseason, I put out a mock draft Monday, Baltimore Ravens, 7 rounds, no trades. The reason I do no trades is just too difficult to predict. And I like to look at who will potentially be available in each pick that the Baltimore Ravens are going to be sitting with, most likely on draft day. So that's why I do it that way. But as always, comment down below your mock drafts, the players that you want me to take. And again, we're 3 weeks into this. We do not know everything about every single prospect. So if I draft a guy and you go, hey, this guy actually has knee problems, let me know. Please do. I've watched these guys. I like these guys, but again, I don't know all the information about all of them. The Senior Bowl just kind of wrapped up. Shout out to the TCU wide receiver. He was the MVP of that game. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So starting off, obviously, we're going to go through 7 rounds. The first couple of rounds, I will give more details, and because I feel like people are more intrigued to the first 3 rounds, day 1, day 2. But starting off at cornerback, I decided to go with Jahdae Barron. And people that watched last week's episodes, they're like, man, you're drafting Jahdae Barron again? I don't like to draft the same player over and over again. That's not my intention. Don't worry if you're like, man, this guy just takes the same people every time. No, that was not the case. I looked at every single player that was available. I looked at the edge rushers. The best edge rusher available was Nick Scorton. I did not go with Nick Scorton because I felt like he would not be able to impact the Baltimore Ravens immediately as a pass rusher. Can he come in and be a good run defender right away? Yes, but the Ravens don't need that. The Ravens at their edge position, they need pass rush. All right. Speaking of pass rush, Myles Garrett just requested a trade. So maybe we're talking about that tomorrow in tomorrow's video. But today, mock draft. So I didn't go with him. Donovan Ezeraku, who I do really like, he was available. Princely was available. The Landon Jackson was available at edge rusher. None of them I really felt like were better than the corners available. Siobhan Revel out of Eastern Carolina was available. The corner out of Ole Miss, he was available. But I feel like Jahdae Barron is the best corner available. In terms of wide receivers, Matthew Golden, Beck, Alec Iamaner, those were the top 3 receivers. Didn't really love any of those guys for the end of the first round. I like them as prospects. I'm not trying to discount them by any means. But then offensive lineman, it was really just Josh Connerly. And in my opinion, I don't think Josh Connerly would be a bad selection, but I think Jahdae Barron would be a fantastic selection. He's one of the best corners, one of the best secondary players in the draft. He can play all over the field. He can play slot, he can play outside, he can play safety. And what the Ravens love to do is they like to move their guys all around, right? We have Marlon Humphrey, who, yes, he's now kind of a slot corner, but you can put him outside. You can put Kyle Hamilton in the slot. You can put him in the box. You can put him over top. Darius Washington, you can play him in the box. You can play him in the slot. You can play him over top. Adding a corner that had 5 interceptions last year, played his best football against the University of Georgia in, the SEC championship game. He played them well in the regular season game they had against Georgia. This guy's an absolute baller. He's gotten better every year of his career, and I think this year he's going to be a first-round pick. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes earlier than 27. But again, if he's there, that might be my number 1 player in the draft for the Ravens to target, unless somebody else happens to slide. But next week, I'm going to make a promise. I'm not going to take him with my first pick. I will pick someone else, but he's just too good to pass up. Speaking of too good to pass up, round 2, pick 59. You guys know I love wide receivers. And you guys know I love Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. If you don't know about Jaden Higgins, he's 6'3", and he was measured at 6'3" at the Senior Bowl. I don't know why I was stumbling over my words there. So he actually is that height. He's a big body wide receiver that's going to run digs. He's going to run posts. He's not necessarily going to be a deep ball guy, but he can get the contested catch. When you look at him, you have to consider basically how the Ravens utilized, an Anquan Bolden. Is he Anquan? No, I'm not making that comparison. But for Ravens fans that are looking for that guy that you can hit on third down, that you can hit on fourth down, the consistent guy in the red zone, right? That's not going to be the deep guy. That's not going to be killing you on the drag routes, right? He's killing you in the intermediate level of the field, which Lamar Jackson, that's where he's the most deadly, right? Lamar Jackson isn't the best thrower of the football 50 yards downfield. But Lamar Jackson is one of the best in the NFL at hitting the intermediate routes, right? That's why his tight ends always do so well. That's why Zay Flowers on the crossing routes is so dominant. That's why Rashad Bateman was able to get so many touchdowns this year from about 15 yards away from the end zone, was because that's where Lamar Jackson thrives. And Jaden Higgins, that's where he thrives. He was the fourth down, like they ran slot fade on fourth down to Jaden Higgins multiple times this last season, and it worked multiple times. That's very rare to have in a wide receiver to just run slot fade on 4th and 3. And they just felt like, yeah, they got it. He can make the contested catch on the sideline, but he doesn't necessarily have the speed to be a burner downfield. But he can get you a jump ball. He will hold on to the ball. He catches it with his hands every time. I'm a huge fan of Jaden Higgins. I drafted him in mock draft 1, did not draft him last time. Again, not trying to draft the same players over and over again, but I do really like these first two. No one else that I draft is somebody I drafted before. So keep that in mind. But we get into round 3, pick 91 in the draft. I went with Ashton Galati or Jalot out of Louisville. Please correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But he is a pass rusher from Louisville that can sit on the edge and was very productive in the ACC last year. He's somebody that I think that the Ravens could absolutely use right away. He does have the size to potentially be able to, make an impact in the NFL. He's 6'3", 275 pounds. That weight right there is already going to be beneficial in the run. When you look at where he lined up last year, I'm going to get the exact number off of my phone, but he lined up 477 times outside the tackle and then 116 times over the tackle. So, he has experience playing over there. He also lined up in the B gap a little bit, not a ton, but he's done that throughout his career. In his year in 2022, he actually lined up more over tackle. So he's played all across the the defensive line outside of the true interior, right? The 1 tech, but he's played 3 tech, he's played 5 tech, and he's played outside the tackle. That's something that the Ravens can absolutely use. And then you look at his stats, and he had 5 sacks. He had 11 hits. This is somebody that was productive in the ACC. He had 9 sacks last year. He had 7 sacks the year before that. He's done a very good job in his football career of getting better and better each year. He's one of PFF's, favorite guys in the ACC, and that's something that I look for when I'm drafting players is players that were not just 1-year wonders. I don't like to necessarily do that because when you do that, it's a little bit of a risk. Not saying you can't ever take a 1-year wonder, but this is someone that was productive his entire year at Louisville, and I think he could be a good player to draft if you're looking at, the Ravens in round 3. They went with Adisa Isaac last year. He wasn't necessarily able to stay healthy. I think Ashton, again, I'm going to butcher the name, but I'm just going to call him Ashton. Ashton will be a really good option, as another guy because I do think pass rush is a need, and I don't want to go the first 3 rounds without taking a pass rusher, which is why I ended up going with him. But for all the people that I know are already in the comment section, and they're like, TTB, Makana, why are you not taking offensive linemen? This is a huge need. And to that I say, round 4, pick 127, Luke Kandra out of Cincinnati. He's a guard. I do think offensive line, I think guard is a need. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're doing with Faalele. We don't know who's starting at left guard because Makari is probably gone. And obviously we don't know what we're doing with Ronnie Stanley. We're probably not keeping all 3. And so getting an offensive lineman that can play right away, I think is a need. And guard is much easier to get later in the draft that can play right away than tackle. So you can get a round 4 guard and start him year 1. It's pretty rare to draft a round 4 tackle and have them start year 1. Not saying it's impossible, but at this point in the draft, I haven't gotten a tackle. I think the strategy, if I'm the Baltimore Ravens organization, is okay, we haven't gotten anybody, we're keeping Ronnie. That's the strat. And maybe get Ronnie on a 1 or 2 year deal, draft somebody, and then develop them underneath. But Luke, he played right guard at Cincinnati. He gave up 0 sacks. This year, he gave up 4 sacks last year, 0 sacks the year before that. Only 7 hurries this year, only 1 pressure at guard. He's known for more of his pass blocking, but again, he's a big guard. The Ravens love to have their big offensive lineman, 6'4", 323 pounds, smaller than Daniel Faalele, but hopefully that means he's a little bit more mobile. That was one of the issues with Faalele was you could not get him to kick out, right? When Faalele was up and he had his block, he was good. The problem was getting him to that block. I think Luke would have a little bit better time getting to his blocks, and I think he could hold him just as well as Faalele. So I think that'd be a really good player for the Ravens to draft, potentially start this year, but at least hold, in the organization, as we don't know exactly what the team is going to do with any of those 3 offensive line positions that I named. Next up, pick 135. I went with a defensive lineman. This is an interior guy. I went with Riley Mills out of Notre Dame. I really like this Notre Dame defense. I think they have a ton of great players, right? The corner, fantastic. Xavier Watts, very good. Riley Mills, defensive lineman, 8 sacks this year as an interior guy. And that's not something I'm projecting in the NFL. This is not like a dominant interior pass rusher. He's more of just a massive body on the defensive line. But because the Ravens are kind of losing their really big interior defensive lineman, with most likely Michael Pierce retiring, getting Riley Mills would be beneficial. He's not 375 pounds. He's not 350 pounds like Michael Pierce. He's 295, but he is 6'5". I think he can put on the weight that'll help him in the run stuffing, but he does have the strength to hold up a blocker. And really, when you're trying to be a good run defender and you have a linebacker like Roquan Smith, holding that guy up is just enough, right? He's not going to beat you a double team at this point in his career, but we don't know what we're doing with the interior defensive line. I think he could be a good backup, 1 tech or 3 tech for Travis Jones and Justin Madubuike. I'm sorry, Nnamdi Madubuike. I want to make sure I get that right. So that's why I went with him. I think it would be a decent draft pick. And, he missed the college football playoffs. So if you're watching it, you're like, I never saw him. He was not playing. So that would be why. Next up, pick 176. I went with Jack Nelson, tackle out of Wisconsin. I got the tackle, 6'7", 316 pounds. This is not a guy that would start right away, but he was a left tackle. This is the guy where I'm thinking, hey, if you're the Ravens, you need to replace Ronnie Stanley, but that's not going to happen this year. So, drafting a tackle that can sit behind him, learn from him, learn the system. He's not too big, but he has the exact size that you're looking for in an offensive tackle in the NFL. The question is whether or not he will develop, and that comes down to coaching. And I believe in this Ravens coaching staff, at least in terms of developing offensive linemen. I think they've done a pretty good job historically. The question is keeping that offensive line talent. And he's not nearly the project that Faalele was. Because every time I feel like I say, developmental offensive lineman, people think Daniel Faalele. He was like a super developmental guy. And again, I don't think Faalele was that bad. He wasn't the best guard in the NFL, but I'm not someone that's like crying to replace him. But again, I did draft somebody that could replace him if the Ravens wanted to move on. Next up, round 6, pick 183. I went with another wide receiver because all of the people that I bet commented after I drafted Jaden Higgins, because I predict these comments because I see these comments in the other mock drafts and all the other videos that I do. When I talk about receivers, people go, we don't need a big body. We need a deep threat. We need someone with speed. I went with Ricky White out of UNLV. He transferred from Michigan State. He played 3 years, I believe, at UNLV, and he was very good. He had like almost 1,400 yards last year. He had over 1,000 this year. He was one of the best players in terms of, yards per route run. He can catch a slant over the middle and take it to the house. He has great ball tracking ability, which is one of the things that I think a lot of people don't recognize when looking at deep threats. Because you can have guys that get open downfield. Rashad Bateman gets open downfield. Rashad Bateman struggles with ball tracking, which is why he dropped that pass against the Cleveland Browns in like week 4, whatever it was. He struggles with that. He's not necessarily a true deep threat. I love Bate, but that's not his game. Was he better this year at ball tracking? Yes. But Ricky White is just a pure deep threat. That the Ravens could bring in and just try him out in those situations. He's 6'1", so he does have size. He can make contested catches if needed. But I think it would be a good option to try and take a shot on Ricky White because we do need that speed at wide receiver. He brings that. Next up, round 6, pick 203. This is the first time I'm drafting this position in the Mock Draft Monday series. I'm going with the tight end, Oronde Gadsden Oronde Gadsden the second out of Syracuse University. This guy's big. He's 6'5". He's not necessarily a great blocker at this point in his career, but you look at who the Ravens tight ends are. Isaiah Likely was not a blocker coming out of college. Mark Andrews was definitely not a blocker coming out of college, but they both are good at blocking because blocking is effort at the tight end position. Yes, there is technique involved, but the Ravens have done such a good job of developing these tight ends, Charlie Kolar, obviously Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, into becoming dominant run blockers. I don't think Oronde is going to be a dominant run blocker right away, but I think he can do a serviceable amount and be a tight end 3, or maybe even a practice squad guy, because we have 2 tight ends, actually 3 tight ends up for contract after this season. We're going to have somebody to replace at least one of them, maybe even 2 of them, right? A lot of people want Mark Andrews gone. I want Isaiah Likely to stay. Like, if it ends up being Likely and Kolar stay and then Gadsden is our tight end 3, I think that would be a good situation in 2 years. I would not be upset with that. And then again, if we need to, if Gadsden isn't the guy that we think he maybe could be, draft, an earlier tight end. But this is a really deep tight end class. Gadsden's a really good football player. Next up, round 6, pick 209. I went with a guard, Timothy McKay out of NC State. And I'm going to skip to the next pick too. I went with another guard, round 6, 213, Dylan Fairchild out of Georgia. I'm trying to bring in bodies. We need to figure out who is starting at left guard. We need to figure out who is starting at right guard. We have Sala, we have Voorhees, we have Falele. In this draft, I'm drafting 3 more guards to add into the mix because we don't know exactly who's going to start. Ben Cleveland is most likely gone. I don't think they're going to re-sign him because he hasn't been able to start. If Falele gets beat out in camp, that's a good thing. And then, we don't know exactly who's, Voorhees did okay when he played. He wasn't bad by any means, but bringing in that competition, valuable. And again, when we have 11 draft picks, we can't take one of each position. We got to start doubling up. I even tripled up because I just feel like guard's a huge need, and it's much easier for them to contribute right away. And they're both coming from Power 5 conferences, right? Georgia, great offensive line factory. NC State, they're playing in the ACC. They've had some good offensive linemen come into the NFL recently. And the final pick, this is unfortunate because this is the first time I've ever drafted this position in a mock draft Monday. I went with Ryan Fitzgerald, kicker out of Florida State University. I don't necessarily think Justin Tucker is coming back next year, which I hate to say, but with how things are looking, I think the Ravens are going to be in the market to draft a kicker. That also could mean they end up, signing one, not ruling that out, but they drafted their punter. Like, they know what they want with their special teams. And when they drafted Jordan Stout, they had a ton of picks just like this. If the Ravens had 6 picks in the draft, they're not drafting a kicker. But with 11 picks, most kickers go undrafted anyway. Ryan Fitzgerald is seen as the number 1 kicking prospect in this class. Might as well get him. He was a 90% kicker last year. He's made 6 50-plus yard field goals. He's hit game winners. He improved every year of his collegiate career in terms of field goal percentage. So I think Ryan Fitzgerald, again, I don't want to draft a kicker, but with how things are looking, hoping things change, but with how things are looking, it looks like the Ravens are going to have to find a new one. But that's it for the NFL draft, the mock draft. Make sure to let me know your mock drafts. Comment down below. I'll run through my picks again. They're up on screen. You guys can see. I'm not even going to point. Jahdae Barron, Jaden Higgins, Ashton Gillette, Luke Kandra, Riley Mills, Jack Nelson, Ricky White, Oronde Gadsden II, Timothy McKay, Dylan Fairchild, and Ryan Fitzgerald. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe for more, and I'll see all of you again tomorrow talking about Myles Garrett and potentially a trade to the Ravens.